All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 3 showdown stream for the Travelers Championship. Going to get you guys ready for all of your lineups tomorrow with a talk through some of the strategy for Saturday's action, a weather report and how that will impact play, as well as a look through some of the shots gained metrics, building a player pool for tomorrow, and we'll tie it all together with a look at how to build some lineups too. So hopefully today ended up treating you guys nicely. I ended up having a pretty good showing in a lot of the big single entries, saw a lot of SHIPIT Nation logos around me in some of those big field contests. So hopefully you guys in the chat were able to also take advantage, because a lot of the guys we talked up yesterday ended up having themselves a day. So let's try and run it back for round 3, round 4 as well for Sunday's action, and finish this weekend strong. So I see we already got Alan down there, Colin as well, Goku Lex, Joseph, Aaron, and Chris. Let's have ourselves a Saturday. So let me know any sort of player deep dives that you want. We'll go through those a little bit later on. I appreciate the kind words, Alan. We got Gokulect with his trademarked Luke chat right off the bat. And yeah, like Joseph said, guys, smash the like button if you guys haven't already. Let's subscribe to the channel too, so we can get those numbers up. And today I was able to play some golf with my buddies. So pretty stoked about that. It had been like a week or two since I gotten out there on the links myself. Didn't play the best, but hey, we had a whole lot of fun at it. So can't complain from that angle. But let's talk through this golf course today. So it played a little bit easier in the afternoon, and I didn't watch the broadcast. I was playing golf myself, but from my understanding and what I could tell based on some comments I saw, it looked like the wind really died down as the day went on. And if we take a look at this above graphic, you'll see that pretty much from the start of play, it was 17, 18 miles an hour. But in the afternoon, it was only close to like 13, 14 miles an hour. So it did drop off a little bit as the day went on. So that's probably why it played to about a 0.3 shot difference between the morning and the afternoon, but nothing drastic like we had for round 1. So with this forecast for tomorrow also looking pretty flat, this is the Saturday HRRR that we have on the bottom. You'll see that in the morning, they're calling for sub 5 miles an hour of wind. In the afternoon, it does kick up ever so slightly to closer to 7, 8 miles an hour sustained. Maybe that leads to like a quarter stroke difference between the morning and the afternoon, but nothing drastic like you had for round 2. So that's why I played it pretty flat across the board. I had guys from the morning, had guys from the afternoon that I was mixing into lineups. It's going to be the same thing for round number 3. So I'm personally not using the weather to my advantage, just because I don't see a big enough discrepancy between the morning and the afternoon tee times to warrant that sort of thing. But I'll always be keeping an eye on this forecast as the night progresses to see if potentially the PM gets a little bit spicier, because if so, maybe I would slightly lean towards some of the morning starters. But as is, I'm not seeing that kind of situation. So just like the first few days, it is going to be 2 sums off of hole number 1. They're starting at 8:30, so a little bit later than rounds 1 and 2. And the big difference, I'd say, compared to the first few rounds, is that they're starting with the bottom end of the leaderboard. So after the first 2 rounds were completed, now you see your more traditional setup for Saturday and Sunday, which if there was a weather edge, it would be like maybe the early guys that got that. If the winds do kick up on those forecasts, it would be your lower-owned players that would be on that side of things. So maybe if that ends up coming to fruition, you could find some leverage with your earlier starters. As is, you could still mix in these early guys, maybe not so much from the weather perspective, but because they're going to be a little bit lower owned. And I don't have my ownership projections done quite yet. Wasn't working on them out there on the golf course, but I can tell you that in general, these guys that are teeing off first tomorrow are going to be some of the lowest owned players that you have on the slate. And of course, the reason for that is that your later starters are up in the top 5, top 10, top 20, and your casual PGA DFS players are going to want to jam a lot of those guys into their lineup. So though there's not per se a weather edge for round number 3, there could be an edge to taking some of these mid to earlier starters just because they're lower owned to begin with, and also because they have to be more aggressive. If they're going to try and make up all that ground, get into the top 5, top 10 at the end of the week, it's a no-cut event. They really have nothing to lose. They're guaranteed a pretty solid paycheck no matter where they're finishing up. I like that mindset for my earlier starters too. So not really weather that's putting me on a lot of those players, but just the slate dynamics that are more so getting that done. now that the weather's out of the way, we'll talk through shots gained metrics and building a player pool. The shots gained metrics are part of the puzzle, and then you're going to add some stuff on top of that as well when you're building your player pool. So we're going to talk through what a ball striking popper looks like, maybe what a short game regression candidate would look like with the shots gained metrics. And then we'll also talk through course history. That's what I look for in some of my plays. And then also what a high upside golfer looks like as well. But any sort of player deep dives that you want me to do, go ahead and hit me up with those right now, because after we talk through those core 4 things that I'm looking for in my player pool, we're going to move on to any specific questions that you've got. So the main thing I do when we're looking at round number 2 stats is I go to round 2 and I look at the ball striking. So just like we did after round number 1, these guys that gained a whole bunch of strokes with their off the tee play and approach play are worth a few extra looks. So not surprising to me at all to see that Lucas Glover had himself a day with windy conditions. He's one of the best wind players that we've historically seen on tour. So him gaining 5 strokes ball striking might have had a lot to do with that. But at Johnny Vegas, he gained over 3 strokes ball striking. At Justin Thomas, Denny McCarthy, Daniel Berger, and Adam Scott were all able to gain over 2.3 strokes to the field with their shots gained off the tee and approach. So some of the guys towards the top, like especially a Justin Thomas, a Denny McCarthy, are going to get some extra steam. So these kind of guys, it's not like they're terrible plays, but they are teeing off later. They're getting a lot more attention from the masses than per se a Lucas Glover, a Vegas, or a Berger are. So if you're looking for some of these ball striking poppers, it's not always the guys in the top 5 that I'm using for that, but more so like these Bergers that are going to be a lot lower owned comparatively. So I think a Berger with him losing those strokes with the short game categories could also be a look for some short game regression as well. But in Adam Scott, he lost over 3 strokes putting, and Austin Eckroat had a really good tee to green day, but gave it all away on the greens, losing almost 4 strokes in that category. These are the sort of players that I'd be looking to for bounce backs. And because Eckroat didn't have the best round in general, kind of just stuck in place after round number 1, he's probably not going to be as chalky as what he was for round 2 showdown. So perhaps he's in play as a pure punt towards the bottom end of the board. But even if you're not in the top 5, the top 10 of the shots gained ball striking stats, even if you're just gaining 1 to 2 strokes to the field, that is still very respectable. And the added component with some of the guys further down is that they're not going to get as much steam as the players at the top end of the board. So a McIntyre, a Matthew Pavon kind of stands out, or as players that the shots gained metrics look really good on. And Nick Taylor, he's had a good ball striking for rounds 1 and 2 at this point. All players that I'm going to be sizing up for my player pool. And I also like to look at the short game categories. So unlike the ball striking stats, which is off the tee and on approach, around the green and the putting, the short game categories tend to be a little bit more volatile. So for example, an Eric Cole, Justin Thomas that gained over 3.5 strokes to the field on the greens, that is going to be extremely hard to back up in back-to-back days. Joe Highsmith, Hideki Matsuyama, Steven Yeager, all of that same sort of story. And if you look at some of these putters, like JT didn't have the best putting day round 1. Steven Yeager lost strokes to the field. Hideki Matsuyama wasn't making all that many putts. A lot of times you'll go from losing 2-3 strokes to the field in this category to gaining the 3 to 4 that you see there as well. So that's why these kind of players, you kind of got to raise the red flag on if they were short game dependent. Like if you were a little bit more balanced, like a JT gaining off the tee and on approach and with the short game, maybe it's not as big of a red flag as somebody like Hideki Matsuyama that lost strokes in the 2 ball striking categories, but gained over 3 strokes with the short game. So it's always, dependent on the player, also dependent on the rest of the shots gained profile when you're taking a look at it. But ideally, we want guys that are into the dark green with these left 2 categories. And then it's not like they have to be losing a whole bunch of strokes in the short game categories, but we don't want them to be gaining 3-4 strokes in any given round over there. So around the green, we could say a lot of the same about. So these guys that gained over 1.5, even 2 strokes with the around the green play, probably going to be hard to back that up in back-to-back days. So like especially your Tommy Fleetwoods, your McCarthys, your Patrick Cantlays that gained in both short game categories, that is a little bit of a red flag to raise. But these guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes in these categories as well could also be a look for a little bit of a bounce back. So the ideal with those sort of players is that it's not a good thing that they're way into the red and these right 2 categories. It's that if they were solid elsewhere, they could be a bounce back spot. So for example, Austin Eckroat was one player we pointed out before. Adam Scott, we can say the same thing about. They gained in the ball striking categories, but gave it all away with their putting on the greens. So I wouldn't be using like a Davis Riley in this scenario as a short game regression candidate. Like, sure, he's probably not going to lose 3.5 strokes short game every single round, but he also lost 2.5 strokes ball striking today. So he's still got to look at the full shots gained picture to really get an idea for a lot of these players. But ball striking poppers, short game regression candidates, those are two ways to get onto my player pool for round 3. Course history. So looking at players that have played well around TPC River Highlands, that's another way that I use the shots gained in the profiles to my advantage. And then I also look at high upside golfers. So to give you guys an idea of what I mean by a high upside golfer, if you go to PGAtour.com and click stats, go over to scoring and scroll down to birdie or better percentage, I'm just talking about guys that make a whole lot of birdies. And the reason why that's important, and if you're new to DFS, this might be pretty mind-blowing news for you. You don't have placement points for rounds 2 and 3 showdown. You don't have to worry about where a guy's starting on the board. It's all about the amount of birdies, the streaks that you post, maybe a bogey-free round, if you can pull that off. It's giving your DraftKings score for round 2 and 3 showdown. So why wouldn't we want to focus on the guys that make the most birdies on the PGA Tour? Because that is obviously correlated to your projection on DraftKings. So, for example, Justin Thomas, that was half the reason I played him today as one of my core plays. He's the number 1 birdie maker on tour. Except Straka, I used him in my showdown lineup today. He's the number 2 birdie maker on tour. It's not like it's going to work out every single slate, right? They don't smash for 6, 7 birdies every single time. But these guys in general, like a Harry Hall you could throw in there, Scotty Scheffler, Sam Burns, Akshay Bhatia is in this sort of field. But even like your fringe players like a Kevin Yu, a Sanjay M, a Matty Schmid rounding out the top 15, all worth a few extra looks as well. So it's not like every single one of these players is going to be in my player pool. Talking about the ownership component once more here, if they're low owned though, if they're going to be a pivot play and relatively cheap, a decent price tag, then for sure you're going to see me on those sort of players. So DFS, right? It's not just a black and white sort of sport, black and white kind of scenario where it's super easy on whether you're getting onto a player or not. You want to be looking at multiple different factors and making those decisions. So let's go through any player deep dives that you got, and then we'll round this thing off with a little bit of strategy on DraftKings too. So where to leave off in chat? Don't want to make sure I didn't leave anyone out on that. When will Tom Hoagie figure his life out? You'd have to ask him, man. I think he's having some fun out there for sure. He's not having his best golf lately, but I don't know. Shots gained profile doesn't look great. He lost off the tee, lost around the green. He did at least gain with the approach play and the putter. Send my guy Hoagie a DM on Twitter. Maybe he'll get back to you. But honestly, shots gained profile, it wasn't beautiful, but it also doesn't look like it's that far off. For round 3, is Fleetwood worth at the ownership, and what should we do around him? So is he worth the ownership? That's a question that you're going to have to answer for yourself. Nobody can tell you the answer to that, right? You have to decide how much you like him, whether he's going to be worth taking at that sort of ownership. I would say, though, if you're going to use him at that sort of ownership, he'll probably be one of the higher owned players for tomorrow's slate. He's got to get different at 1 or 2 other spots. It could be an 8K guy, a 7K guy that you're using for some differentiation. You could force in a sub 3%er in the 6K range to offset that sort of thing. It's not who you play, it's how you play them. So, if you're going to choose to take a more popular option like Fleetwood, just make sure that at least 1, 2 other spots in your lineup that you're forcing your hand a little bit with that differentiation. So that's how I'd handle that. And yeah, I'm not sure on Fleetwood. I haven't built my player pool yet, so I can't give you anything there. Glasses and a haircut? Definitely not a haircut, but yeah, we do have the glasses on today. And do I have court? Indeed. If you see me with a buzz cut, no glasses, no swearing, something's definitely up, but yeah, not this time around. How did I play today? What was my best shots gained category other than shots gained beers? So didn't have time for the shots gained beers. I had to leave my boys hanging because we had this live stream to do. So I had to scuttle over here to get this thing done. But I played pretty terribly. All things considered, it was not one of my better rounds. I didn't even take score today because I haven't played for like 2-3 weeks. But I hit some decent iron shots. I had some like 10 footers for birdie. Did not make an entire birdie putt on the entire round. I had like 6 or 7 that were pretty reasonable and didn't even sniff the hole. That's the thing. Like, that's why I say I played pretty terribly. So I made a lot of bogeys, and putting wise, I didn't get it within a foot of the hole, it felt like, on every single putt. So it was a tough scene, but I had a whole lot of fun. I haven't gotten out there. I've been watching golf in person rather than playing. So it was nice to get a little change up there. You had a great day today. Let's piggyback tomorrow, that's for sure. And I saw that you sent me a message, Nick. I haven't been able to fully deep dive it yet, but you were getting close in that $5, huh? That would have been nice to get you to take that down. Let's do it tomorrow, though, right? You said best show on YouTube. I appreciate that, Todd. Thank you for the kind words. Let's see. Alan says, how am I feeling on Clan on a scale of 1 to 10? It's a good question. So that comes down to the shots gained metrics. In general, I've got him at like a 7 out of 10. I mean, I'm very high on Clanton in general. High birdie percentage player, somebody I think is going to be a top 10 player on tour someday. So T31 wise, shots gained profile wise, it's like a 6 out of 10 because the off the tee play was a problem today. He did lose over 2 strokes with his driver, but the most important category out of all 4 shots gained categories is our shots gained approach. So even though he wasn't great with the short game either, lost a little bit over a stroke between those 2 categories, him gaining almost 2 strokes with the iron play offsets a lot of that negative that you see there. So I would say it's like a 6 out of 10 stat profile. You know, if he had been a little bit better off the tee, I mean, it could have been a lot better than a 6 out of 10 stat profile, but he's in play for sure. In fact, I'll probably use him because he'll be low owned at T31. Let's see. I wouldn't say anyone's cooked from Oakmont. So if you're looking at narrative stuff, I would say, stay away from that as much as you possibly can. Narratives are going to get you in trouble a lot more than they help you when you're playing PGA DFS. Stat-wise, though, he looked fantastic today. He gained off the tee. He gained over a stroke and a half with the approach play and then lost 3.4 with the putter. I'd say that is like an 8.5, 9 out of 10 stat profile. This is one of the best stat profiles that you're possibly going to find heading into the next day. And he's only T59 is going to be unknown. So, you know, if you're using a narrative as saying like why you wouldn't want to play an Adam Scott at low ownership, then you're probably galaxy braining it a little bit too much. And, you know, sure, we can nitpick, try and find reasons for not using some players. I think especially when they're in the top 5, top 10, they're one of the highest owned players on the slate that might make sense to do if you have to find guys to take out of your player pool. But you don't do that as much when it's a T59 and somebody that's going to be well below the average ownership. So I'd say he's a good play, man. It's just, I'm not 100% sure if he'll be in my player pool. A lot of that comes down to ownership, but unless he's mega chalk, he'll be in my player pool. Like if he's average to slightly below average ownership, like you'd expect for a T59, then I'm gonna have a really hard time not using him. You like Sanjay M? Okay. Good call on that one. He makes a whole bunch of birdies, that's for sure. If you start with Sepp and Lowry, then you hope for a nuke pairing in the morning. Do you have to worry about the other plays with ownership? You do, Aaron. You can't go those 2 and then chalk at the other 4 spots because even though Sepp and Lowry will be a little bit lower owned than some of the other spend ups around them, they're still going to carry ownership because they're at the top end of the board. Those players by default are at least like 8% owned. Most cases are 10 to 12% owned, even if they're a little bit overlooked in that 8 and 9K range. So I still think you have to think about the ownership a little bit for some of your other spots, especially if you're in a large field GPP. If you're in like the big $5 or $25, you can't go those 2 and then chalk at all 4 spots. But if you went those 2 chalky guys and then 2 guys that were like averagely owned, you would get away with that. So you're right in the fact that you're not going to have to do that much to get different if you start with those 2, but you can't completely abandon ownership after that because, you know, if you're going 10, 12% or up top and then 4 straight 10%ers to finish, which would be like the chalk in that 6 and 7K range, then you might run into a few problems. Smash the like button, you heard the guy, and raise a glass to DFS Luke. We're raising our water over here, but I appreciate you guys nonetheless. Maybe Hoagie should have a cheesesteak. Maybe that would help him level up a bit. I think he's got to get to the craps tables personally. Here, that's what he enjoys doing with his time off. Love the first day of summer. Didn't know it was the first day of summer, but that's good to know. Do I have more faith in you or Hoagie to make a positive run? I don't know if I'd say I have faith in either one, to be honest. Hoagie was kind of all over the place. We know that, right? Gained on approach, gained to the putter, but was pretty horrendous in the other 2 categories. Let's look at Kevin Yu's stat profile. So Kevin Yu today, he gained off the tee and then lost elsewhere. Yeah, confidence, that doesn't come with any of these 2 players, I would say. But if I had to choose one of the 2 to kind of figure it out tomorrow, I think I would lean Kevin Yu just because he's played a little bit of better golf recently. Like if you look at the form for Kevin Yu and you compare it to Tom Hoagie, Kevin is the slightly better player in that category, but it's pretty close, I'd say. It's almost a toss up, almost a 50-50 between those 2 players because the stat profile is real ugly for both players. So maybe we look at round 1. We can use that as like the tiebreaker. Round 1, Kevin Yu had a really good stat profile, so that kind of backs it up even more. And then while Hoagie did gain with the around the green play and off the tee play in round 1, he still lost with that approach play. So yeah, after looking at the round 1 stats too, I lean Kevin Yu because Tom Hoagie doesn't normally lose a whole bunch of strokes on approach. And He's made a habit of that for 2 rounds so far. What's going on, Bobby Bro? Welcome on in. And he said he kept you from the large scores. You still think he's capable? Yeah, don't hold it against him, dude. So that's the one thing I'll say just based on that comment is when you're playing PGA DFS and particularly Showdown, you want to have as short of memory as humanly possible. You want to forgive and forget on guys that don't get there. And you also, for the same token, you don't want to fall in love with the guys that got you there the day before. Like, for example, it'd be really easy for me to want to play JT, Tommy Fleetwood, heck, even Straka after the round that he had for me today, and wanted to play them again for round number 3. But golf's a crazy variant sport. It's a 4-letter word for a reason. You hear a lot of cuss words if you're following golfers on the golf course for that exact reason too. I would say that forgive and forget a little bit more. That's something that I've learned over the years and something that can always help people improve their process. You say Clanton never seems to go very low. That's probably a little bit of a short-term memory sort of thing. When he first came out on tour, he was going low early and often. So yeah, maybe over his last few starts, that's been the case. But I would say that he's got a real low round in. I mean, he's just that sort of golfer. He's a good putter. He's a long player off the tee. He's a streaky iron player. Those guys are some of the highest birdie percentage players that we have on tour. So I would give you a little bit of pushback on that one. Let's talk through DraftKings now, though. So in terms of the contest available for round 3, very similar to what we had in round 2. So the Summer Sand Trap is, I believe, the same exact size. It is a 4th to 1st place, which is a little bit more top heavy than I like for a lot of these DPPs, but it's not the worst one that I've ever seen. The Drive the Green is a worse payout structure than round 2. It is a little bit larger at nearly 12,000 entries, but because now it's a $50,000 prize pool, they have $10,000 going to first place. So today it was $5,000 and it was of the 40K prize pool. So it was only an 8th to first place. Now it's a 5th to first place, which is a little bit better than that $25 GBP, the big sand trap, but it's still not an ideal payout structure, I'd say. So where you saw me focusing a lot of my exposure today was on the single entries. I nearly took down this exact contest today. So we'll try and get a little bit better, maybe finish in the top 2 tomorrow, get that $2,500, $5,000 prize pool. That'd be pretty nice in that long drive contest. But the reason why I enjoy playing these contests a little bit more is that the payout structure isn't nearly as top heavy. Now, this long drive might not be the best example of that. It is still a 5th to first place, which is pretty spot in line with some of those GPPs. But when we go down to like the $33 dog leg, this one is 12% to first place. If you find the Albatross, which is the $12 single entry that they run, this one is 10% to first place. So, you know, if you've been on these live streams before, you've probably heard this spiel 1,000 times at this point, which, you know, might get a little bit old if you're somebody that watches every single video. But if you're newer to DFS, this is of the utmost importance for your process. If you want to have better long-term results, if you want to have a more sustainable bankroll over the next 6 months to a year that you're playing PGA DFS, you want these sort of contests because you don't have to finish in first place to gobble up all of that EV. You know, when you're entering in the big $5 or $25 GPPs, it is almost all about finishing in first place for being a winner long-term, for having positive ROI in these sort of contests. It's all about that really big payout that you're getting for the first place, which is okay, right? If you can pull that off, it's great. It does wonders for your bankroll, as you would imagine, right? Winning $20,000 to $50,000, but it is difficult to beat 9,400 entries. It's difficult to beat 12,000 entries like you have in the big $5 GPP. So if you're newer to this, and even if you're not new to it, you've been playing it for a while, but you just want to have more sustainable long-term results, focus some of your exposure on those single entries. Even if it's not a single entry, maybe it's a 20 max that you can actually max enter. Maybe it's a 2 to 3 max. They have a lot of those for Showdown posted as well. What you want to avoid is only 150 maxing contests, and especially if you're not entering 150 lineups. Like if you're entering 150 into this Drive the Green, it's actually not the worst contest. Like it's, sure, 20% to first place is sub-ideal compared to some contests, but it's not that bad. Like it's been 33% to first place in some GPPs. Those are the ones that you really want to stay away from. The issue becomes is when you're not 150 maxing. Like you're just taking like 20 lineups into this kind of contest. When you only have 20 lineups against 150 and you're playing against 12,000 entries, like good luck winning first place all that often. So take a look at some of those single entries, consider that for some of your exposure. It's going to do a lot long-term to help your results. And then with putting together lineups, all I'll say here is that we want to get as much leverage as we possibly can into our builds because we don't have placement points in play quite yet. So just like round 2 showdown, where you want to take advantage of some of the overreactions after one day, you could do a lot of the same for round 3 showdown. So, we went through the shots gained metrics already, kind of gave you guys an idea of players that, could make sense. Up top, a lot of the ownership is tied to where players are starting. So Scotty Scheffler going to be extremely popular. A Tommy Fleetwood, a Justin Thomas, also going to be your chalkiest players towards the top. If we want to get a little bit different towards the top, all you'd have to do is throw in a Xander Schauffele or a Colin Morikawa. And for the sake of this, we're going to throw in Colin because I loved Colin heading into this week. He was one of my outright bets. And if we're going to get him an average to below average ownership now up top, I'll be a buyer on that all day on a player that I really think fits this course well. A Ludwig Aubert at $9,200. My role with him in Showdown is that you play him when he's low owned, when a lot of other people don't want to get there because he is sporadic. He's a loose cannon, not the most predictable player that we have on the PGA Tour, but in large field GPPs, and that's kind of what we're building this for, right? This would be like for the big $5 or $25 GPP where we really do have to think about that ownership with our builds. I love like a Morikawa Aubert start, and it doesn't have to be these exact 2 players, but slightly lower owned player to start because it does give us a little bit more flexibility down the line if we want to take on a little bit more chalk. And even if you don't want to take on that chalk, even if you just want to have a very differentiated lineup, it does give you a chance to have even more leverage in your build. Like, we always say like, oh, you can play chalk and you want at least 2 to 3 pivots in a lineup. You can go 5 or even 6 pivots in a lineup if you want to. I wouldn't do that for main slate. I surely wouldn't do that for round 4 showdown. Round 4 showdown with the placement points, it's probably getting a little bit too cute. For main slate, you're getting too cute as well when you have a 4-round sample size. With 4 full rounds, the cream tends to rise to the top a little bit more than what we have for showdown. But when it's just an 18-hole sample size, like what we have here for round 3 showdown, then I'm totally fine with going pivots across the board. If you want to be, balls to the wall, you really want to go after that leverage, I'm okay with doing so. But just for the sake of making this one a little bit more interesting, with kind of like forcing our hand a bit when it comes to the ownership, let's take some guys that are getting some ownership. So let's go Jason Day. Let's throw in a Henley, who at -4 is going to be one of the more popular players that we have in the 8K range. Let's also, just for the sake of making our life really difficult here, let's throw in a Wyndham Clark, who's also going to be pretty chalky at T13. If you're in the large field GPP here, your last man in, you may have to consider leaving some salary on the table, and you're for sure going to have to be taking somebody that is sub 3 to 5% owned. So, for example, as your last man in, you could not take a Jaeger here. If you took a Jaeger, you probably don't have enough leverage in this sort of lineup. If you took a Fitzpatrick, you might be able to get away with that because he will be a little bit lower owned. But because we were a little chalkier than I would really like, especially with like these last 3 players that you plugged in, you might want to consider leaving $200 to $300 on the table and still taking an ownership pivot. So, we mentioned a few people that were looking at Hoagie. Maybe you could use him as your last man in and leave $300 on the table. You could consider using like a Seabez, an Eckroat, leaving $200 on the table. Could be an option in the large field GPP. But really what I like to do a little bit more is to embrace that ownership variance, embrace the chaos of what is on a showdown slate. And rather than taking a Henley, like maybe we go to Straka instead and we really force our hand in that range. Rather than taking a Wyndham Clark, we go to the slightly lower owned player in Akshay Bhatia, who sets up pretty well for the next round, makes a whole bunch of birdies as well. And then now for our last man in, you don't have to leave salary on the table. In fact, if you wanted to play Eckroat as your last man in here, who stat-wise sets up pretty well heading into round number 3, you could get away with that because of some of the other decisions that we've made. And, if you really wanted to be safe about it, like you could swap Jason Day to like, I don't know, maybe somebody like a Daniel Berger there, then pretty much no matter who you took as your last man in, you'd get away with it in the big $5 or $25. But, if you're in the single entries, something that's a little bit smaller, maybe like the 2 to 3 maxes, 20 max contests that don't quite have 10 to 12,000 other people that you're playing against, you can take on a little bit more chalk than you otherwise would. But just because I said that you can take on more chalk, guys, just remember that doesn't mean that you have to take on more chalk. Ownership leverage, especially on a showdown format, is always a good thing. So incorporating it you can never really go overboard for rounds 2 and 3. So that's all I've got, guys. Going to go ahead and cut off the live stream there. Best of luck with everything that you guys are going out there for Saturday. If you haven't already hit that like button, go ahead and do so. First off, what are you waiting for? If you haven't already smashed that like button, and also go ahead and subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content going forward. That's going to include a Sunday live stream getting you guys ready for round 4's action as well. It'll be after play ends tomorrow evening, as well as my prop and betting live stream that I'll be doing on my YouTube channel a little bit later this evening as well. That'll be, I believe, 9 p.m. Eastern time is going to be the start time that we go with. But follow me on X/Twitter for the exact start time there. Also on YouTube, you can find me at LukeDFS, going through all the prop and betting stuff on Underdog and Prize Picks. We're going to talk through matchups on the sports books for round number 3. We'll go through pin locations, stat averages from the course, really giving you guys a good idea for the kind of conditions and the kind of setup that these players are going to be facing. And even if you're not a big DFS prop player yet, you're not somebody that attacks Underdog, Prize Picks matchups at this point, we try to make it as beginner friendly as humanly possible to teach you the process, what to look for, and exactly how to find value for yourself. And it's not like a live stream where I'm just like, oh, bet this, right? It's just like we have here for these showdown live streams. It's all very process based over there as well. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. I'll see if there's any last second questions to go through, and then if not, let's have ourselves a slate, everyone. So thoughts on Morikawa's ownership and then 1 to 10. So I kind of hinted at that when we we're going through the lineup construction. I think it'll be about average to maybe even slightly below average ownership, just because of some of the other guys around him kind of sucking that up there. So I'd say the 1 to 10 on him, like the stat profile, let's go back to that so I can show you exactly how he set up from today. It's not like, it doesn't stand out that much, but it was a lot better than most players. He gained off the tee. Approach play could have been a little bit better. He wasn't short game dependent. That is good to see from Colin Morikawa. Just has to hit the irons a little bit better than he did today. Round 1, he did hit the irons like you'd expect one of the best iron players in the world to hit them. If he can get back to gaining a stroke, 2 strokes in that category, I mean, he could have a really good round 3. But the stat profile will put him at a 6 out of 10, maybe better than most players, but has yet to get the irons working, which is always going to be his calling card. It's no cut. That is exactly correct. And then you said one of your college buddies grew up close to this track. Yeah, if I grew up close to this track, I'd be trying to play it as much as humanly possible. And the beauty of it is that's only 6,800 yards, and it's not overly long for you or me. So probably would be a whole lot of fun to play. I know you play Philly Cricket Club over there in Philly. Another fun, shorter track that me and you would probably enjoy playing quite a bit. So, hey, when we get up there to Philly, we're going to have to play when we get out there on the greens, see exactly how it goes. Cromwell's not a bad place to visit either. Then you said, is Scheffner a must play? I wouldn't say that he's a must play, especially because it's Showdown. Here's what I'll say about Scotty is I'm not always the biggest fan of playing Scotty on Showdown because he's more like he kills you over 4 rounds with his consistency. He's not always the guy that's shooting -7, -8 rounds. I mean, he did it round 1, so he obviously kind of shook that this week. That's why he's the leader after 36 holes. But most of the time when Scheffler's getting into contention, it's him shooting like -4, -3 every single day. He still gets ownership for Showdown. He's still like 30% owned for most Showdown slates. So I prefer not taking him in that format. I always play him for main slate, though. He's like one of my highest exposed players that I use for main slate almost every single time he tees it up. But on Showdown, you'll see me using a lot of other players most other times. So great question there. I wouldn't say that he's a must play, but the top projecting player on the slate, you can't go wrong there either. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with everything that you guys are going with. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night for the round 4 live stream.